तो जब हम लोग दृष्टिगत रखते हैं तो ऐसी अवस्था में इन बालकों के लिए जागरूकता का क्रम और जागरूकता में अधिगम आधारित शिक्षण को कैसे प्रभावशाली बनाया जाए, शिक्षणेतर रणनीतियां कितनी सशक्तिशाली बनाई जाए जिससे हम अपने विशेष आवश्यकता वाले बालक एवं बालिकाओं की आवश्यकताओं की पुष्टि के लिए निरंतरता के साथ प्रयास कर सके, उन्हें अधिगम में अधिक से अधिक समन्वित कर सके, अधिक से अधिक ऐसे बालक एवं बालिकाओं का सुदृढ़ अधिगम हम बना सके। इन सभी प्रयासों को एकीकृत करने के लिए भारत सरकार के द्वारा स्थापित सामाजिक न्याय और अधिकारिता मंत्रालय निरंतर ऐसे बालक एवं बालिकाओं के लिए विभिन्न प्रकार के आयोजनों को करता रहा है और उसी कड़ी में यह राष्ट्रीय स्तर पर मनाया जाने वाला लर्निंग डिसेबिलिटी वीक आप सभी के बीच में है। आज के इस टॉपिक बिहेवियर मैनेजमेंट ऑफ चिल्ड्रन विद लर्निंग डिसेबिलिटी पे अपनी विशेषज्ञता रखने हेतु हमारे बीच रिसोर्स पर्सन के रूप में जुड़े हैं IG अनुसुईया जी, रिहेबिलिटेशन ऑफिसर, डिपार्टमेंट ऑफ स्पेशल एजुकेशन, NIPMD चेन्नई। आज के कार्यक्रम में पैट्रॉन्स की भूमिका में हमें अपना आशीर्वचन प्रदान कर रही हैं आदरणीय बीना ई चक्रवर्ती मैम, निदेशिका पंडित दीनदयाल उपाध्याय राष्ट्रीय शारीरिक दिव्यांगजन संस्थान नई दिल्ली। हमें अपना मानसिक आशीर्वाद प्रदान कर रहे हैं आदरणीय श्री रमेश पांडे सर, निदेशक CRC लखनऊ। कार्यक्रम आधिकारिक रूप से अपनी गति को प्राप्त करे, इस हेतु मैं संस्थान में कोर्स कोऑर्डिनेटर के रूप में अपनी सेवाएं प्रदान कर रहे आदरणीय श्री राजीव रंजन सर, सह आचार्य वाक एवं श्रवण को सादर आमंत्रित करता हूं कि सर आप आए और कार्यक्रम में अपना आशीर्वचन प्रदान कर कार्यक्रम को उद्घाटनित करें। आदरणीय राजीव रंजन सर।
Thank you, Nagesh ji. And I welcome today's speaker, Madam IG अनुसुईया मैडम को, जो कि हमारे बीच बहुत कम समय नोटिस में हमारा इनविटेशन स्वीकार किया। मैडम आपको बहुत बहुत नमस्कार एवं स्वागत है इस कार्यक्रम में। और आज का जो टॉपिक है हमारे बीच वो लर्निंग डिसेबिलिटी वीक के अंतर्गत है। और बिहेवियर मॉडिफिकेशन एक ऐसा है जो कि आई विल नॉट से कि ओनली लर्निंग डिसेबिलिटी बट मोस्ट ऑफ द चिल्ड्रन विद CWSN और नॉर्मल पॉपुलेशन में आते हैं। तो मैं उम्मीद करता हूं कि आज का जो वेबिनार है, हमारे जितने भी पार्टिसिपेंट्स हमारे साथ जुड़े हुए हैं उनको कहीं ना कहीं आपके एक्सपर्टाइज से सीखने को मिलेगा। और हमारे जितने भी ऑफिशियल्स हैं हम सबका आभार प्रकट करते हैं कि इस तरह से जो हमारे क्या बोलते हैं उसको नॉलेजफुल वेबिनार जो ऑर्गेनाइज होता है वो काफी हद तक हमारे सभी स्टेक होल्डर्स जो हमसे जुड़ते हैं उनको मदद करता है। So I welcome you, ma'am, on behalf of our director, Sri Ramesh Pandey ji, and all officials and officers, staffs from the CRC Lucknow. Thank you, madam. I welcome you on the board. So please, thank you very much.
बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद सर। हमारे बीच आज के कार्यक्रम में मुख्य वक्ता के रूप में अपनी विशेषज्ञता प्रदान करने हेतु हमसे जुड़ी आदरणीय IG अनुसुईया मैम, रिहेबिलिटेशन ऑफिसर, डिपार्टमेंट ऑफ स्पेशल एजुकेशन, NIPMD चेन्नई का मैं बहुत बहुत स्वागत करता हूं। और सर मैम को सादर आमंत्रित करता हूं कि मैम आप आए और अपनी विशेषज्ञता विषय बिहेवियर मैनेजमेंट ऑफ चिल्ड्रन विद लर्निंग डिसेबिलिटी पर हम सभी के बीच में रखें। आदरणीय IG अनुसुईया मैम।
Yes, shall I start?
Yes.
Shall I start? Yeah. Good morning to one and all, and maybe good afternoon once again. I'm so happy to be part of this webinar in celebrating the Learning Disability Week. And I would like to thank my director, Sri Nachiketa Raut sir, and my head of the department, Sri P. Kamaraj sir, for permitting me to be part of it, and the organizers to invite me on this occasion. I personally thank the director, CRC Lucknow, Ramesh Pandey sir also, and the team that he is operating for this webinar. for inviting me to share my expertise on this occasion. And just give me a minute. Let me upload my PPT and I will go with the session. Once I share my PPT, I won't be able to see any of it. So anything is of discomfort, or if the slides are not moving, I would request the participant kindly tell me so that I'll be able to rectify it and we can proceed with the session. Okay. Is my slide visible for you? Can anyone tell me whether the slide is visible? Is the slide is visible? किसी ने बताइए ये स्लाइड्स आपको दिखाई दे रहा है?
Yes,
Yes, yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you. I'm so happy to hear your voices. Let us have similar interaction, which will make the session more fruitful. We know presenting over online, at times we don't get to meet people, but we can hear the session and we can interact with our queries after my session. Okay. Yeah, as the topic has been introduced to me, it is about behavior management of children with specific learning disability. And when we talk about learning disability, we need to help ourselves to understand what learning is all about and how learning has its own impact in children having specific learning disability. And that in turn, how it affects the children's behaviors. Okay, it's going to be a cyclic understanding of what learning is and what learning disability children with learning disability may face and how that can impact their behaviors. So to understand what learning is, we all know this process. I just want to bring into my context of speech because so that there is a link of presentation that will flow on based on this. So we all know how the information is processed within us. Like when we say something is being learned, something is to be learned. So the process that goes behind that is we all receive an input through our sensory organs. This input that we receive through our sensory organ needs an attention. We need to attend to the stimuli. And based on the stimuli that has been perceived in the brain, that is a meaning being added to that has been transferred to the memory. Okay. So this memory can be of short term or also it can be for long term. In these two aspects, when it is being moved on to the memory level, the symbolization that will happen is what is being retrieved in our behaviors. The output is mostly in 3 R's. The action is mostly through reading, writing, or arithmetic in the form of symbolization. It can be verbal or non-verbal. Why are we learning this at this point? Because we all know attention, perception, memory. These 3 are the basic for any information to process, whether it is listening to some instruction or whether it is sitting in the classroom. When we sit in the classroom, when a teacher is teaching for a children with specific learning disability, then what happens? These are the higher mental abilities. You know what all plays role behind it? The age of the individual, the language proficiency of the individual, the opportunities that the individual has got to knock out, and then the culture that he is from. So these are the 4 aspects that will have its influence upon the higher mental abilities that will total up in our learning. And mostly what the models that in education we follow is, we have three portions. We see the triangular presentation in the slide: learning environment, learning process, and the learner. Okay, now the process we saw that starts from input to output. And the learning environment, you all know, it can be any place. It can be home, it can be community, it can be a classroom, it can be any place. And the learners are the individuals who is part of it. So when these 3 are put together, there is an academic learning as well as a scholastic performance. So we have to understand this is what is the process in learning. when we learn anything, say for example, I have to learn Hindi. Okay, what am I supposed to do? For me to learn Hindi, I need to attend to it. And then I need to try to add meaning to what I am understanding. Then I have to store it in the memory. And whenever it is needed, I need to recall it. Say, for example, I say namaste. When I say namaste, how did I learn that? I have seen somebody saying namaste with their hands put together. So that means I have attended to it. And then I have added meaning to it. Like when should I say namaste? When a person look at me. I ask her for the first time. Then what do? I store it in my memory. So my working memory is so active. Whenever I see a person at first sight, I recall to say that. Okay. So this is a simple version of it. So I've learned to greet others. This is one form of social skill learning. So this learning process and the learner, the environment where the learning happens, is a milake onai. Like these three aspects needs to be put together for any learning to occur. Okay, this we know, but this needs to be properly presented. You know why? Sometimes we tend to see children not able to perform what we give as an input, especially children with learning disability. उनको तो potential रहता है, like they have the potential, but for their performance, if you see, it may not match. Why is it not matching? This process we have to understand as a total. Holistically, this needs to be taken care when we are handling children with specific learning disability. So having understood what learning is all about, so we also have to go by what are the characters or what are the checks or the items that is being prescribed to put a group of children with SLD. As ICD 11 implies, we need to obtain answers to the following to understand if the problem are due to SLD for children. Okay, children having challenges in reading, challenges in writing expression, or challenges in arithmetic skills. So what all we have to see? These are the scale that you have to keep yourself to identify. Is the problem in learning academic skills? Is a child having only problem in his academic skills, that is reading, writing, or arithmetic? Are the problems below his age, or is it below his level of intellectual functioning? Identify that. So we need to have their psychological evaluation. And are the problems impairing the child's academic or occupational functioning? Having this condition, is he not able to perform as expected? So that we have to see. And then we also have to identify, when did it start? Did it start during early school years? Means early identification needs to be thought about. So it is mentioned that children with specific learning disability are identified in the early school years. That is, exposure to school for an year later will be the age range that has been recognized under RPWD Act to identify as their early age of intervention. Okay, so this we have to understand. And one more thing that we have to do is we have to help ourselves to do a differential diagnosis. This problem cannot be explained by other disorders. A child with intellectual impairment, or a child with hearing and vision impairment, a child with motor neurological disorder, no, they cannot be part of this. It means if we are sorting out the condition, these categories needs to be sorted, should be the exclusion criteria. And psychosocial factors. A child is unable to do academic skill because of lack of availability of education, lack of proficiency in language of academic instruction, or psychosocial adversity. Please help yourself to understand these three categories of psychosocial factors if the child is facing, and which influences his learning, then we may have to exclude based on the differential diagnosis. So these aspects needs to be grounded down so that deciding upon an individual to be called as SLD has its own pattern of system. So let us understand how it has been defined. So we try to help ourselves to know what learning and learning process is all about for any individual like you and me. Okay, then we try to help ourselves. How ICD-11 bottles down a condition, and now we are getting into how it has been defined by different agencies. We all know the National Joint Commission on Learning Disabilities. In 1980s, the way that has been defined is it's a heterogeneous group of disorders. And this heterogeneous is a term That will help us to understand that a child with specific learning disability doesn't fall into a homogeneous group. That is, each individual will have his own individual differences in his performances. Though two individuals you will see having an average intelligence and having a condition of dyslexia, he or she may not have a similar problem or similar challenges. So it's a heterogeneous group of disorder manifested by significant difficulties in acquisition and use of listening, speaking, reading, writing, reasoning, or mathematical abilities. I know some of you may be aware of it, but let us recall through this session. So basically what we have to understand is the problem arises. It manifests because of the difficulties in acquisition and use. What they acquire, what they use. In what aspects? In listening, speaking, reading, writing, and reasoning. And these disorders are intrinsic to the individual. That means it is within an individual, it is to more pertaining to one single individual, and it is perceived to be due to central nervous system dysfunction. The causative factor that is being brought about with a different research understanding is it is presumed, means it may be due to central nervous system dysfunction. So this is the understanding in 1980s regarding the specific learning disabilities. We have to relate it to what Indian Act says regarding this, and we are fortunate after so many years of proposals, 2016 this condition got recognized in our legal legislative aspects. So what does RPWD Act says about SLD? It says it's a heterogeneous group of condition wherein there is a deficit in processing language, spoken or written, that may manifest itself as a difficulty to comprehend, speak, read, write, spell, or to do mathematical calculations, and includes such conditions as perceptual disabilities, dyslexia, dysgraphia, dyscalculia, dyspraxia, and developmental aphasia. What this actually says, whenever we learn a definition given in, by different authors or different legal aspects, we have to help us to clarify each term that is mentioned in that. So heterogeneous group of condition. What it refers to, it is a heterogeneous group of condition. It is a condition. Why it happens? It's because deficit in processing language. Can be either spoken or written. How it happens? It manifests in difficulty in comprehending, speaking, reading, writing, spelling, or to do mathematical calculations. What are the conditions that falls under that? The types would be perceptual disabilities such as dyslexia, dysgraphia, dyscalculia, dyspraxia, and developmental aphasia. Clear? Okay. What it is and how it is happening. What are the different types of SLD? This has been explained through our RPWD Act 2016. Okay, let us see what a child having a difficulty in reading will face. What are his challenges? First thing that we have on the top of it is recognizing letters, matching letters to sounds. This is, they will have difficulty in recognizing letter. Recognizing letter is identifying letters. This is K, this is Th, this is P, this is M, yeah, it is A, it is B, or it is C. So recognizing the letter, and secondly, it is told matching letter to sound. When I print the letter K and there is a sound that I produce K, that image and the sound should match. Okay, it should go in concurrence. Then only it is associated with the sound and letter. Children having reading difficulty will have problem in recognizing the letter and the sound. They will see a print of K and they may say Ma. Means they are unable to associate the sound with the letter. Okay. And instead, if you ask them, give me match K, means they may be able to match. But when they have to read it, when they have to match the sound and letter, there may be challenges at a higher abstract levels. And second point that is mentioned is vocabulary. These children will have limited vocabularies because of their reading difficulties. And mastering rules of spellings, the mastering rules of spellings has got certain rules to follow when they have to use a consonant and a vowel. Mixture of a consonant and vowel. There is a small vowel and there is a big vowel also. How do they combine that and frame a letter, word? So letter, sound matching, and framing a spelling, and bringing about vocabulary. All these are linked together. So they will have difficulties in following sequence of direction. So when there is a direction being presented in a reading print form, that for the sequence of following through the print form will be the challenge for them. Usually, if you see children having reading difficulties, when you present them a word problem, okay, word problem is always a sequence. It will have the sequence of information that will be presented where they need to link the information so that they can derive at what pattern of what formula needs to be applied or how it needs to be worked upon, the application aspects. So following sequence of direction, it can be in any form, anything. So when it is in a print form and they have to read and follow the sequence, they'll have challenges. Understanding non-literal languages. So we know that sometimes we present subtle way of certain things. It will not have a direct meaning. It may have a hidden meaning in it. They tend to go for a literal language understanding. So there are challenges in that. So reading at expected level will not be present in them. And then learning alphabets, numbers, days will automatically be a deficit for them. So these are the different difficulties a child with dyslexia face. So when we talk about child having arithmetic challenges, that is child with dyscalculia, what are the challenges, what are the difficulties will be present if a child is having an impairment in mathematics. So remembering facts and formulas will be a challenge. Learning musical concepts, because musical concepts are always based on certain notes and calculations. And easily they get disoriented with the left and right where there is to be applied. And dealing with money transaction, yes, of course, it includes lots of mathematical skills in it. And learning abstract concepts of time and direction. So maybe the simpler version of it, we can train them to learn. But when it piles up, that is when it becomes an abstract aspects, then there will be challenges for them. Then acquiring spatial orientation, that will be a challenge if a child has got dyscalculia. And keeping track of time and sequencing the events, again, this will also be difficult for the child. Mastering arithmetic facts, yes, again, it's overall difficulties a child with dyscalculia will face. When you talk about child with dysgraphia, that is impairment in written expression. See, we tend to understand dysgraphia means like something to write, he will be having coordination issues. So not that way. It is written expression of the child's thoughts. What happens? The initial state, there will be awkward pencil grip. Like holding a pencil, it is tripod grasp. There will be awkward pencil grip and body position. They'll avoid writing or drawing tasks. Whenever there is something to be copied from the board, they'll tend to avoid it. When they are supposed to do any assignment, they'll tend to avoid it because it includes written expression. And then trouble forming letter shapes. So that's where we see reversals, mirroring images and all that. And there'll be substitution, there'll be omission, the soda aspects will be there. And inconsistent spacing between letters and words. When we write a sentence, between a word, there should be a space. These children, what they do is they tend to avoid leaving space and it will be a continuous written and there will be perseverance. They keep writing. Breaking down or leaving space in between words or letters will be a difficult task for them. That is basically planning, motor planning, okay, on that. And then the rules that is behind a written expression, they will face difficulties. Poor understanding of upper and lower case letters. What do? They write uppercase when it is in a sentence form. But when it is to be utilized with uppercase, they tend to mix up. In between the words, there may be uppercase. In between the sentence, they may use uppercase. And wherever there is requirement of lowercase, they may misplace it with or replace it with an uppercase. So there will be an alteration on that. Then inability to keep track of thoughts. See, basically, I think something. I need to process my language, then only I can write, isn't it? So what I think should be on my paper. What answers I studied at home, I should write on my exam paper. But what I think will not be there on the paper because they have difficulty in tracking their thoughts. That's why what happens, trouble organizing thoughts on paper. So that when they have to put it on a paper, yes, they will not be. Many a time I've seen client coming forward and saying, ma'am, I understand the concept. I learned the information. I know I can. and I can explain to you wonderfully and I can say the answer completely. But when I am supposed to write on my paper, I am unable to write what I know in my thoughts. This is a complaint, like no problem that they come to me in my clinical services, and they face that as a major thing because mismatch of their thoughts and written expression that brings about a major emotional disturbance, social and emotional disturbance in a child with SLD. That's why I'm happy this topic has been brought out for this day, where this has been always taken up as a last preference rather than, like, mostly it is the strategies, all those will be attended to for child with SLD. But this aspect is taken as a last option. But I'm happy that the organizers proposed this topic. And we have to help ourselves to understand what are the research evidences that says whether the child with SLD faces emotional problem or behavior problem. Yes, there is evidence. It says that between 24% to 52% of children with learning disabilities exhibit signs of behavior. That means children above 20%, 25%, that is 1/4 of the population, or it can be even 2/4, that is half of the population having this condition in a varied levels, they will have signs of behavior problems. It can be young children, it can be adolescent, it can be adult. So it is any age group. It is not pertaining only to adolescent group or only to adult group. Any age range, okay, any level of children with learning disability exhibit this. What happens actually? There will be a confusion and there is a contradictory pattern of performance. Let's see an example in it. Like a child may be bright and interested in learning. So he's all okay and he wants to learn. But what happens? Struggle to behave appropriately when placed in reading group. Why he is struggling? Because he has difficulties in reading. But we have placed him in a peer group where the reading is expected out of him. What does he do in that case? Like, no, he cannot work on that over there, no. So there it will have an impact on his behaviors. He'll be overexcited or disruptive. What happens? Causing the teacher to remove them from the group. He wants to learn. Just because of his performance that is contradictory to what his interest is, he's been taken off because others are getting disturbed. Okay, this can happen. It is all hypothetical condition. The student might enjoy hearing the story read to the group. But when you ask him to read, what he will do, when you're saying a story, he will be shaking his head, he will be showing all expressions, he feels that he is good at understanding, he may even reciprocate giving certain answers. But when you ask him to read, he'll put his head down and kick his feet and when he is read aloud. So what happens? He behaves differently. Till then he is okay, he's active participating. Asked to read, he will be not able to do because of his difficulties and he'll put his head down and kick their feet. So this is all you can observe when they are pushed to do certain activities that will be challenging their deficits. And we have study by Morgan et al. In 1985. He says children with learning disabilities do have anxiety, low self-esteem, dysfunctional attributions, depression, inattentiveness, disruptive behavior, aggression, delinquency, etc. And same in 1983 when Kellam et al. Has researched, he found that children with reading difficulties are vulnerable to emotional as well as conduct problems. So they'll have emotional problem, they'll have conduct problem as well. In 1993, Huntington and Burner, when they have researched out, they have experienced higher level of anxiety in children with learning disability and higher prevalence of somatic complaints. That is, they simply say though they may not have any illness, but they may say, I have headache, I have stomach ache, and I don't know, I cannot sit, I cannot listen, I cannot attend to. This kind of complaints will be seen in a higher prevalence, and there is a reduced self-esteem. And a study in 1999 with Pryor et al. Says they do have anxiety again, depression, phobia. This has been researched among children with mathematical difficulties. You see, we have seen in different categories. When you see different categories of children, most of them have these kind of signs that is indicative of intervention for them to cope up with their socio-emotional disturbances. So these are the warning signs. What all we saw? Anxiety. What do? They blame teachers for bad grades, bullying their peers, physical ailments, just the reasons they say. This is somatic reasons they say, stomach ache or headaches. They're not doing homework assignments, not wanting to go to school, not wanting to show parents homework, self-derogatory or self-critical comments they pass, refusing to communicate. Why? To avoid confrontation. Refusing to do an in-class assignment or task, refusing to follow classroom rules, saying the work is too difficult, skipping class. See, these are the behavioral expressions of a child who have challenges. So when these behavioral expressions are at a high frequent, which is more performed in higher frequency, and they repeatedly do this, then it will automatically categorized under problem behaviors. And when it has been categorized under problem behaviors, it needs attention. It needs to be modified. It needs to be managed so that the learning is not affected in the child. And when you talk about self-esteem, see, that is something needs to be seen in a separate identity, because the personality, that the later behaviors, everything will be linked to this. What do they do if they have damage to their self-esteem? They often have difficulty asking for help with peer-related situations. They'll never go and ask help with his classmates. They'll remain silent. And they may be lacking social emotional skills necessary to handle peer pressure. When there is a peer pressure, okay, a pressure created among his classmates, when it is surrounded in his situation, he will be not able to manage that. And then when he's been subjected to bullying, he will not be cope up with their emotions. So that will be a challenge. And they may have trouble knowing how to interact appropriately with teachers and peers, because language is a deficit, right? And they may be struggling to understand the social clues. Fine, all this is there. I have specific learning disability. I am in a classroom. I know I have difficulties in reading, writing, and arithmetic. What happens? Won't I try to learn? Because I'm interested in learning. I will attempt to learn. But what happens if there is a repeated disappointment and lack of progress? As a student, if I have SLD and I try my level best, but every effort of mine appears to be a disappointment or lack of progress, what happens? It will result in learned helplessness. The child will be in this state if he is not intervened properly. So social emotional well-being is very important for him to cope up with the challenges that is facing in a classroom situation or any learning situations. So behavior problems, actually, it is learned. It is learned. Okay, like a skill behavior, problem behavior is also learned. How is it learned? Based on the consequence that they receive. Same wise, problem behaviors is also learned. We all know when our child cries, if we give something, they know if I cry, I can get it. So this is the consequences, getting what he wants. Behavior is crying. Then what he will do? The consequence is so pleasant, he will repeat crying behavior. Crying behavior is not a desirable behavior. It will become a problem behavior if the intensity is increased. So this is what is all about. So problem behavior is also learned, but it can be removed. Let us help ourselves to understand how these problem behaviors can be scientifically managed. We need to do 3 steps: behavioral assessment, and we have to plan for behavior management, and we need to do reassessment. What do we do in that? Initial analysis of the problem needs to be done. How do I analyze? I need to understand the behavioral excess, behavioral deficit, and behavioral asset. Okay, that means clarification of problem situation is required. What is this? I have to analyze ABC. Okay, what is the antecedent, what behavior, and what consequences are. Which are the behaviors happening in a high frequency? Which are the behaviors happening in low frequency, but it is problem behavior. Okay, this we need to understand. And we also have to know the asset. What is the asset? Which are the strengths of the child? What are the aspects that is important to build upon? Okay, Then motivational analysis. Motivation analysis is the reinforcement strategies. I need to identify the child's likes and dislikes. So based on the likes, I need to plan my reinforcers. It can be a social reinforcer, or it can be secondary, or it can be tertiary also. Whatever the child likes, that needs to be sorted out and kept aside. Why do we need it? It is a motivational analysis. And developmental analysis needs to be identified. You have to analyze, you have to assess whether the child have any biological changes, that is treatment. If he is under any treatment, that you have to rule out and identify. Then sociological changes. We have to understand whether there is a socio-cultural features that needs to be targeted. And behavioral changes. We have to identify the pre-morbid level, that is antecedent aspects. Okay. What condition where the change is first noticed, like when was that exhibited, how the pattern of behavior is. So what are we now trying to help ourselves? We are trying to know what a behavioral assessment is all about. When I identify a child is having a behavior problem, first step I need to do is I have to do a behavioral assessment. When I am doing a behavioral assessment, I have to understand what are the behavior deficits are there, what are the behaviors that is seen excessively, and what are the behavior that he has. And I also have to help in identifying the likes and dislikes. Then it also needs to be identified the sociological aspects, and that is ecological aspects. And then we have to understand the antecedent factors of it. Okay. And analysis of self-control. So what are the consequences? What are the consequences that the child faces when he exhibits the problem behaviors? So these aspects needs to be brought in. And we also have to identify somebody from the family also who can be part of our behavior management program. When you plan a behavior management program, when you're doing an assessment, understanding a child is important, understanding child environment is important, understanding the family members' contribution for implementing the management program. That is also very important. So all this needs to be worked in understanding in collaborative way, so that the management program can be fruitful. Okay. Socio-cultural aspects, that is child's environment, we have spoken about. So let us just move on to the techniques that can be used in reducing the disruptive behavior. That is, when you talk about child with specific learning disability, one can be disruptive behavior, but most of them say they'll be having anxiety, depression. They may have a socio-emotional problem. There may be a conduct problem. All this has also been narrated. That's what we saw, isn't it? So first thing, we'll see the portion where when the child is having a disruptive behavior, what are the techniques to be used? When you see child having socio-emotional problem, which technique needs to be applied? So we will see both of it. Okay. Now, first thing we are going to see is when a child has a disruptive behavior, that is behaviors that is undesirable, the strategies that we are going to see now will help us in rectifying it, managing it. We all have to understand behaviors can be learned, behaviors can be unlearned also. So these two can be done. So when you see a child with problem behaviors, we can help the child to unlearn that problem behavior. Okay, so that can help him to manage himself in situations. That is why it is for managing his behaviors whenever that stimuli is being arised. Okay, so first thing is changing the antecedent. Antecedent is the before aspect. That is, if a behavior is occurring, say for example, a child is crying. What induced him to cry? What has triggered him to cry? That is what is antecedent. So when we are tackling when we are applying the techniques in managing the behavior, first thing we have to do is change the antecedent. That whichever factor that has been identified as triggering the problem, that needs to be restructured. So that say for example, you have 5 children in your classroom. In that, one child is disturbing another child. What we can do? We can either change the child position in such a way he is close to the teacher. He is not next to that boy or girl who is triggering stimuli with whom he tends to apply that problem behaviors. So you restructure it. When he has been repositioned, what happens? He will not be, he'll be closely monitored, and those behavior problem can be reduced. That can be minimized. and it will be manageable in a classroom situation. Okay, for which this restructuring can be applied. All techniques will not be applicable for all children. Okay, we have to be very careful in planning the behavior management program. It depends upon the ABC factors. What antecedent, what behavior, what consequences, and what is the function of the behavior. We all do a behavior for some kind of benefit. Either for us to, say for example, we do certain things for us to gain attention, or we do something to escape from the situation. Okay, so there are certain benefits that the child will gain. That's why he create problem behavior. When we talk about children's specific learning disability, in the classroom, if they execute any problem behavior, most of the time it is for them to escape from the challenges. That's what is the maximum benefit of their problem behavior. So when they are escaping, we need to use certain strategies, but in a different levels. Okay, this is the common strategies we are learning. It is more individualized. We have to plan individualized BMP. Then only it is applicable. Extinction is another strategy. It is like ignoring the behavior. But ignoring a behavior should be in such a criteria. It shouldn't be self-injurious behavior. Then if it is self-injurious behavior, we shouldn't use this technique. We can use this technique of extinction or ignoring when the child's function is to gain attention in the classroom. If you see in a classroom, a child may say, Miss, they'll be calling frequently, Miss, teacher, Miss, teacher. He keeps calling just to gain your attention. But so that such behavior executes, then what we can do is we can just ignore that behavior. Maybe attend once, then followed by similar behavior can be ignored. So that will reduce the child's frequency of performing such behavior in a classroom situation. Timeout. Timeout is like taking out the child from his most interested activity. That is very important. Timeout is removing the child from the activity. Removing the child from the activity should be an activity of the child's interest. Say, for example, if I remove the child from an activity that he doesn't like, then he will do that frequently. So fix it up for interested activity. So what happens over here? You have to remove the child from that activity for 2 to 5 minutes. Maximum it is 2 is fine. Then bring him back to the activity. But when you are doing this application of it, we should never talk to the child or give any kind of nagging over there. You go out, stay there, come back and start the activity. Okay, the duration of the child executing the timeout should be minimal. It shouldn't exceed the time. Physical restraint. Physical restraint is like withholding something. Say, for example, you have a child in a class. He always pulls hair of his friend, whomever is sitting next to him. When he is pulling the hair, if we just hold the hand to stop that activity, it is called physical restraint. So this can be applied on certain behaviors that is executed in classroom. Response cost. Response cost is a child paying back for what what the problem behavior that is executing. Say, for example, a child's positive behaviors, child's desirable behaviors are rewarded. So he earns the reward. And say, for example, he executes a problem behavior. For that behavior, he has to give back the reward that he has earned. That is, he is paying back of what he has gained. Okay. So the privileges, it can be privileges also, it can be any rewards. So this is what is response cost is all about. So he misses, say, for example, he gets 5 stars and he executes problem behavior. What you do, you remove 1 star. That is, he is paying 1 star for his behavioral problems. This is what is response cost. This can be executed if the child has a comprehension and his understanding level is in such a way, I earned something, I'm paying back. Okay. So that for such kind of category of children, we can apply this. This can be applied with children with specific learning disability. They can be given privileges. They can be asked to pay back if they execute the problem behaviors. Overcorrection. Overcorrection is behavior is executed. He has been asked to correct that as well as and do it an extended activity. Then it is been put forward as a overcorrection. Conveying displeasure. This we can very well apply to anybody. Even you, it can be you, or it can be myself, or it can be child with special needs, or it can be child with specific learning disability. Conveying displeasure. If there is something undesirable behavior, we have to convey that it is not okay. Okay, it is not okay. So what we have to do is we have to let the child know that, but not in a class or in a common platform. Call the child alone, inform him the right behavior there. We are not going to scold him, call him, and scolding and all is not allowed. You have to convey to him, I am not happy with this. I want you to do this. He has to know what he is expected to do. That needs to be conveyed as well. So that is what is very important over here. That is one kind of strategy that we can use. And I told you, two parts we are going to see. One part of it is when there is disruptive behavior, when there is a behavior problem that is executed just to have a situation that he does it to avoid his presence. There's something else we saw. Children with specific learning disability do have depression, anxiety, and all that. No, for that category of condition, we use a technique called cognitive behavioral therapy. This cognitive behavioral therapy is actually psychotherapeutic treatment. What it is like? It helps people learn how to identify, change maladaptive behavior, thought patterns that have negative influence on behaviors and emotions. See, this is the cycle. A situation, the thought because of the situation, that in turn affects the feelings, and that in turn showed in the behavior. Okay, situation mostly, if you see for children with specific learning disability, it is learning situation where there is reading, writing, arithmetic is part of it. So whatever happens in that situation, okay, whatever is of unpleasant for the child, that will be taken up to thought level. At the thought level, he'll be thinking over it. We'll be seeing what all errors in thinking in my next slides. That then you'll understand. Then feelings because of that. Okay, and how he feel about it. And then because of that, what are the behaviors that is executed. Okay, this is a chain of reactions. So this kind of things can be approached through CBT, and it can be helped for the child who is facing such maladaptive thought patterns. There's a research that says that CBT is a successful approach. Like for children who's having anxiety disorders, we saw many research have been done, and children with specific learning disability do have a higher rate of anxiety. They do have depression to a certain level, and they do have stress because of it. There'll be an anger as well. Like, I am unable to do it. Like a kind of a frustration that also can be seen in children with specific learning difficulties. So it says that out of 11, 7 studies says that it is this treatment has shown a higher response. The model behind this thing is, like as I said, the situation. Something happens. Thought, the situation is interpreted. At the emotional level, a feeling occurs as a result of thought, and then an action in response to emotion. Okay, so a situation impacts thought, it impacts emotion, it impacts the behavior. The strategy in developing a negative thinking, the same strategy is going to be applied for the child for positive thinking also. Okay, for him to get out of that anxiety level. What really pushed him there? What can be done in the same pattern, in same steps to get rid of it? So it's basically replacement of negative thinking into positive thinking. That is what is CBT is all about. So the principle is the psychological disorder, this characterized by maladaptive thinking, which is derived from maladaptive belief. There is a triggering factor is the belief, and the behavior executed is maladaptive thinking. Okay, and then because of which emotions and his behaviors are disturbed. What happens when I use a CBT? We have short-term results and we have long-term results. If we need to have a short-term result, the maladaptive thinking needs to be modified. For a long-term result, the maladaptive belief itself needs to be modified. So we need to arrive, we can arrive at this only after analyzing the child or the individual who is facing such a difficulty. So what happens is, like, individual identifies his negative ways of thinking or feeling during problem situation. Therapists help to connect between thoughts and feelings. Actually, what we have to understand is, I showed a slide on damage to self-esteem, isn't it? Just recall that slide. That will help you to associate what kind of problem they will undergo. Okay, then question thoughts and beliefs. That is good self-talk and bad self-talk. Children with learning children with specific learning disability do talk to themselves. Okay, they have a habit of talking to themselves. Even we do it, even they do it, but they do it in a higher level because of the challenges. So we have to help them to have a good self-talk. Okay, that's what I said. This approach is totally of replacing negative thinking into positive thinking. So we have to generate healthy alternatives. That is, we are helping the child for a healthy socio-emotional well-being, though there is deficit in his conditions. So these are the common thinking errors. Mind reading. What we do, assuming you know what people think with little evidence. Like you yourself assume that my friend will think about me like this. Now, he may or may not think in that angle, but he will have that thought process. That is a thinking error. Then fortune telling, predicting that things will get worse or that there is danger ahead. That is, the child, what he will think, there is going to, like, I'm going to face failure if I attempt to do it. It may not work out for me. I may not be able to make it. I cannot do this. I'll fail in this. Like a kind of predicting before even attempting to do the task. And catastrophizing, that is, believe what has happened, will be so awful and unbearable. That is, something past experience is there. That's what we saw in a situation. That has moved on to his thought level. At the thought level, what he does, once it has been a failure, he may try to correlate every time the same thing may repeat, which is unbearable. Okay, so this kind of thinking errors will be there. And labeling, assigning global negative traits to yourself and others. That is, like one incident happened, so it has been generalized, and labeling that it is so. Okay, once if the person would have bullied, but what we tend to do, he will always will attempt to bully me like that. No, you label that person that way. Or I don't know, this kind of thoughts will be there in children with the SLD. Try to put a child with SLD in this situation. Discounting positives. That is, less serious about it. They don't consider if something happens positive also. That's a less important given. Why? Because the negative thoughts are more. No, so the positive aspects will come, and that will be given a less importance. See how they are thinking percentage is varying. It's more occupied with the negative thoughts. The negative filter, like, focuses almost exclusively on negatives and seldom notice the positives. They stop looking into the positive aspects at all. Like, say, for example, they have written an exam. They have written for 20 marks and they have scored around 10 to 12 marks, but probably they didn't score maximum scores because these children have a higher intellectual functioning, no? So they know what is expected out of it, and he understands what is a topper is all about. What can be happening if I don't score a level of marks? What he will think is, even the scoring of 12 marks, what he has done is also a positive thing, right? He may not be able to appreciate that. So he'll filter that positive, and then he'll look at, oh, I didn't do this one. I failed to arrive at an answer in this mathematical calculation. I couldn't draw this image and label it so that I can fetch for a few more marks. So all those that he had got as a negative side, that will be predominantly in his thought process. And overgeneralizing, perceiving a global pattern of negatives, and and then dichotomous thinking. He will have all or nothing terms, like, and extremes of thoughts, everything or nothing. He'll never come into when you draw a bell curve, we always categorize people in the bell curve, right? Psychological aspects. So, like, most of the average people will fall into the center of the bell curve. That is the maximum percentage. And one genius and other side extreme or the right and left. What these people will be, they'll be either this side or this side. So it is like mismatching with what their performance and their thinking and their potentials. That is interpreting events in terms of how things should be rather than simply focusing on what is. Uh, Arriving at a problem solution. That is important. That needs to be inculcated in child with SLD to overcome such socio-emotional deprivations. Okay, so this has to be inculcated. He needs to know how to replace with the positive thoughts and how he can appreciate his positive performances, how he can focus on how it can be solved rather than why it happened to me. Like many parents come to me, why this is happening to me? Why this is happening to me cannot be attended to, but how it can be managed upon. That can be arriving at a solution. Some kind of management can be brought about. So this is again a thinking errors that the child will come up. And other side, if you see, they'll be blaming for whatever is happening. Okay, they focus other person's source as negative feelings. They refuse to take responsibilities. There'll never be a child who will come as an initiator. Okay, he will always be passive learner. He'll be passive in the classroom. Why he is more passive? Because for him, if he tries, there will be disappointments. There will be lack of progress. Why should I try and get hurt in front of others? Let me stay away. This kind of errors, thinking errors will be there, which will stop them from executing their actual performances. And unfair comparisons. They tend to compare, the realistic and unrealistic way. Okay, so it will push them to an inferiority level and regret orientation, and focusing on idea that could have done better is in the past rather than what can be done better now. That is like they dwell on the past. They dwell on the past means dwell on the errors that has happened in the past, but they never come into the reality and move forward with the further things. So this all is not, they learn helplessness. That's what we saw in one slide. Yes, they try, they want to, they try for it, but it's a learned helplessness. This will lead to anxiety in the child. This will lead to socio-emotional disturbance in the child. So this approach of CBT helps the child to move on with his difficulties. Again, emotional reasoning, letting your feelings guide your interpretation. Inability to disconfirm. There's a judgment focus that is also happening. Personalizing everything, like anything happens surrounded by him, it will be always, he will think in link with him. He will link himself to that. Only in the negative aspects, not in something positive. See, he also performed 12 marks, got 12 marks. I also got 12 marks. So, wow, I'm up to his level and I can move up. No, that kind of positive thing is not there. See, he is facing this and I am also facing this. Kind of linking only the negative aspects. That's more personalizing it. This judgment, personalizing, disconfirmation, emotional reasoning, all this are the thinking errors. Why we learned so elaborately about the thinking errors is, as we saw, the cognitive model moves from situation, the thought, the feelings, that emotion, and then the behavior. This 4 steps we saw, isn't it? So in these 4 steps, which is to be targeted? The thought level. The thought level is targeted, I think automatically the feeling and the behavior fall in place. That is what this approach is all about. So we have learned elaborately what are the thinking errors that can come up in a child with SLD that will have an impact on his learning. The implications of having negative thoughts, thinking errors, is what we have analyzed so long. So what am I supposed to do? I have to apply CBT approach, and it has shown success in treatment. So what happens is, challenge is on thinking patterns and include behavior challenges. So help a child to challenge his thinking pattern, mood monitoring, problem solving, automating thought sheets, coping cards, cognitive restructuring. These are something to be done for helping his thought process. Then include behavioral changes also. It will be social skill, provide relaxation skill, work upon educating the affective area, and progressive muscle relaxation, activity monitoring. So this is what is programming for a child having a problem in anxiety, or if he is socio-emotional aspects are being affected. Because of his deficits in reading, deficits in writing expression, and deficits in mathematical skills. So this is one of the approach. So we saw two ways. One is for behaviors, that is disruptive behavior, and secondly we saw what are socio-emotional concepts. In these two strategies we have discussed. So these are on a go we have learned today, but we need to help ourselves to learn this in depth in applying in our day-to-day work. Okay, this is just an understanding or an awareness we have learned. To apply these things in a child with SLD in a real situation, we need to go for an in-depth learning. So I am stopping over here, and if there is any queries, we can go for it or over to the organizers.
थैंक यू सो मच मैम। किसी भी पार्टिसिपेंट के अगर क्वेश्चन है तो मैम से पूछ सकते हैं।
I can take queries in Hindi, no problem. They tell me in Hindi, I can understand, I can give back answer in English.
ओके। किसी भी पार्टिसिपेंट के एक क्वेश्चन हो रिगार्डिंग टॉपिक।
Good afternoon.
Yes, please.
May I ask a question?
Yeah, you're most welcome.
मैम मेरे पास एक केस आया, मैं एज अ स्पेशल एजुकेटर से मैं वर्क कर रही हूँ। तो बच्चे को जैसे कि पेरेंट्स बता रहे हैं कि उसको बहुत ज्यादा लिखने में, मतलब हमेशा वो लिखने में प्रॉब्लम करता है, उसे याद हो जाती हैं चीजें, लेकिन वो ज्यादातर मतलब लिखना नहीं चाहता है, हमेशा उसे लिखने में प्रॉब्लम होती है। तो पेरेंट्स का कहना है कि वो स्लो लर्नर है। अगर सपोज किसी बच्चे के अंदर मतलब लर्निंग डिसेबिलिटी होती है, तो हम कैसे, जैसे एज अ टीचर हम आइडेंटिफाई कर रहे हैं कि हाँ लर्निंग डिसेबिलिटी है, स्पेसिफिक उस केस के लिए नहीं कह रही हूँ, ओवरऑल बात कर रही हूँ कि अगर हम ये महसूस करते हैं कि बच्चे के अंदर लर्निंग डिसेबिलिटी है, तो सबसे पहले जो उसका टेस्ट है वो मतलब पहला क्या होगा स्टेप उसको फाइंड आउट करने के लिए?
See, if you have children in your classroom and if you are a special educator and you have
Yes.
only children with special needs with you, okay, what you have to do is you have to help yourself. A child with specific learning disabilities will have problem only in scholastic areas. That means he will have IQ like you and me. And he will not have any problem in his vision, hearing, and his motor difficulty, hands, legs, everything will be functionally normal. Okay, only problem is he will be unable to do when task is given on reading or writing or arithmetic. This child coming into special school may not be advisable one, because they can be provided with a remedial program and they can be in an inclusive setup. Okay, so that stream they have to be moved upon. If you have child in the classroom having denying to write, okay, if he is denying to write in your class, that is special class, if his classroom is denying to write, in that case we have to identify different aspects. If you say if the child is slow learner, then his IQ have to fall below the average. Okay, you have to send him for IQ evaluation. And if you identify the child is having borderline intellectual disability and it is under a slow learner category, then what we have to do is we have to apply a different strategy. The strategy should be like how a child can be engaged in starting from pre-writing to writing skills. Alongside planning for strategies, we have to also choose the reinforcement. Okay, because child avoiding to write can be for different reasons. One is he may not like the activity, or he is not competent enough to hold a pencil to write. So we have to go for an occupational therapy evaluation also to identify if he has a fine motor problem. Okay, and if those two evaluations are done, a psychological report and an occupational therapist report, have that in hand, you interpret from that, then you apply that in your classroom IEP planning. In that case, it will be more successful. Did I?
Okay, thank you so much, ma'am.
Yeah, most welcome.
अदर पार्टिसिपेंट के भी क्वेश्चन हो तो प्लीज पुट कर सकते हैं. थैंक यू सो मच मैम. धन्यवाद ज्ञापित करती हूँ आज की मुख्य वक्ता रेस्पेक्टेड अनसुईया मैम का. मैम, आप अपने बिजी शेड्यूल में जो कीमती शेड्यूल हम सभी के बीच साझा किया है, इससे हम सभी लाभान्वित हुए होंगे और अपने अपने फील्ड में इसको इम्प्लीमेंट भी करेंगे. और धन्यवाद ज्ञापित करने के अगले क्रम में रेस्पेक्टेड डायरेक्टर सर CRC लखनऊ सर, आपके कुशल नेतृत्व निर्देशन में इस कार्यक्रम को हम क्रियान्वित करने और सफल बनाने में निरंतर सहयोग मिलता रहता है. धन्यवाद ज्ञापित करती हूँ रिस्पेक्टेड IPH की डायरेक्टर मैम बीना मैडम का. मैम, आपका भी सहयोग कार्यक्रम को आयोजित करने में मिलते रहते हैं. और धन्यवाद ज्ञापित करती हूँ रेस्पेक्टेड सर असिस्टेंट प्रोफेसर राजीव रंजन सर का. सर, आपका कार्यक्रमों को आयोजित करने में निरंतर सहयोग मिलता रहता है. धन्यवाद ज्ञापित करती हूँ सुदूर क्षेत्रों से जुड़े सभी प्रतिभागियों का जो हमारे कार्यक्रम को पेशेंस के साथ सुने और अपने ज्ञान में अपडेट किए और अपने फील्ड में इम्प्लीमेंट भी करेंगे. इस कार्यक्रम को सफल बनाने में सहयोग प्राप्त हुआ. और CRC के प्रशासनिक अधिकारी रेस्पेक्टेड श्री जी शंकर गणेश सर का. सर, आपका भी निरंतर सहयोग मिलता रहता है कार्यक्रमों को आयोजित करने में. और आज के कार्यक्रम को टेक्निकल सपोर्ट दे रहे हैं श्री सुमित सर का, जो पूरे सेशन के दौरान कंटिन्यू टेक्निकली हैंडल करने में. सर, आपका भी धन्यवाद. और CRC के सभी अधिकारी एवं अन्य कर्मचारी गण का सर, आपका भी निरंतर सहयोग प्रदान हुआ. एक बार पुनः सभी को धन्यवाद. और थैंक यू सो मच अगेन मैम, जिन्होंने आपने इस कार्यक्रम को बहुत अच्छे तरीके से हम सभी के बीच शेयर किया और हम सभी इससे लाभान्वित हुए. थैंक यू सो मच.
Thank you all. See you all sometime. Bye.
बाय.